you both for inviting me and you for coming. Indeed, after 15 or 14 talks and interviews, I'll say something which might surprise you, that my deep sense is that words fail me. Sometimes I describe, and the description, and people want to sum it up in a horrendous name. Otherwise, they wouldn't be satisfied with the description itself. Sometimes I describe, and I feel it doesn't sound terrible enough. And I feel that my first advice and my main advice is to go there and to have field trips. Because indeed there is something very deceptive when we describe with normal terms that we are used to, with our usual dictionary, there is something that is deceptive. It is deceptive because if you say so many people were killed, yes, we can go and we look for other places and we see that there are more people that have been killed over the years and also now. So if we can compare Gaza to Syria, and we can say, okay, it's not so bad. Look at Syria, how many people were killed in such a short period. But then people feel we are encaged there. We cannot move, we cannot travel. So then you'll bring people from villages who never travel out of the villages. So what's the difference? There is nothing, no sentence that it is enough for me to say without adding to it 5, 6, 10 more sentences in order to show and in order to explain why it is so terrible. And I know it's not enough. I mean, I need to say more and more. And as I said, if you go there after 10 days, you understand, or even 2 days, you'll understand more. And you'll understand that we, in a way, have to invent a new dictionary to describe. And I think we have to invent a new dictionary also because people relate more, people outside in the West and Westerners relate much more to Israel than they do to the Palestinians. The Israelis look much more like the Westerners. I mean, no kafiyas, no mandil, no head cover. And also because, and especially in the United States, the important place that Israel plays in your politics, be it because a very strong Zionist pro-Israeli lobby, or mainly because of the very close military and security ties that exist between Israel and the United States. And there are screens that are being placed, screens between the words and the people's understanding. So many screens that I feel I have to go through. And then when I use normal words like checkpoint, okay, checkpoint, or people are stuck at a checkpoint. There is traffic jam from Oak Park to Chicago every morning. So why do they complain? Why is it so bad? So if I were to advise to you a trip, and if you had only one day, I would go to Hebron. Go to the center of Hebron, the old city of Hebron, which according to the temporary agreement between Israel and the Palestinians, was temporarily designed as an Israeli-controlled area. It is a part of around 50,000 Palestinians in a city of 300,000, the center, where there are also some Israeli settlements inside. Go to Hebron, and maybe you can grasp, or I think that you can grasp the vector of Israeli policy towards the Palestinians. The vector of making them disappear, making them vanish. Hebron, as I said, this center of Hebron, the old city of Hebron, was a city of both Jews and Palestinians for several centuries until 1929. Then there were the hostilities. There was hostilities and armed or clashes, and many Jews were killed. Many others were saved by their Palestinian neighbors, and the city was emptied of its Jewish residents. There were a few scores, I think. Or after '67, Israeli Jews demanded to return to Hebron, and they established some settlements there in the middle of Hebron, and in old houses that used to be owned by Jews. At the same time, Palestinians who owned houses, a lot of property in Israel proper, cannot return to their homes, could not return to their houses. So there is no symmetry here. They returned, the Jews returned, but not even the very owners of the houses, and Palestinians cannot go back to their houses. But for the last 25 years, aggression of the Jewish settlers, assisted by the orders of Israeli military, actually made the city experience a mass exodus of Palestinians. It started with a massacre that one religious Jew, a doctor, American-born, perpetuated in the mosque, the main mosque in Hebron. 29 Palestinians were murdered. Some of them managed to kill him on the spot. Now Israel, instead of removing the settlements, it was Rabin, at the time of Rabin, Yitzhak Rabin as prime minister, instead of removing the dangerous settlers and people who are advocating expulsion of Palestinians, if not murder of Palestinians, instead of doing this, Israel imposed a curfew over the Palestinians. And such restrictions on movement inside Hebron that till today are valid, and Palestinians cannot drive, or this old area is all surrounded by roadblocks. Streets are blocked so that people cannot go from the other side of the city inside. They cannot, you have some checkpoints through which you can go only if you are, if you can prove that you live in this area. Through other checkpoints you can enter if you want to go to the mosque. No use of cars is allowed. People have to walk up the hill, and including old women, up the hill with their groceries that they carry. So no cars. If you see cars, it's only cars of the Israeli settlers and Israeli visitors, Israeli Jewish visitors. There are some streets that are completely barred from Palestinian pedestrians. So people have to reach their own home walking from sideways on the roofs in order to reach their own home. Merchants cannot enter from outside. If you want to construct something and you need construction material, you have to go through a very tedious process of asking for permits to bring a plumber to your own house, or a construction worker to your own house to fix a leaking ceiling. Children of the settlers are harassing Palestinian children and old women, and the army backs them. There is permanent atmosphere of fear, of terror, in which those Palestinians live. And no wonder that thousands have left. Thousands, if not, it's hard to people are reluctant to have the exact statistics, but when you go there, it looks like a ghost town. with a few Israelis, because still there are only 500 people there, only 500 Jews living there. And with some hundreds of soldiers, probably more soldiers than settlers, meant to protect them. So I would tell you, if you have one day, go to Hebron, and you understand the vector of Israeli policies of eviction of Palestinians, of making them disappear at least from the eyes of the average Israeli. I live in the West Bank, and I can say that for the past 25 years, this is what I have seen happening is a movement, a contraction of, or the congestion of Palestinians into designated areas in the West Bank, where Palestinian leaders, Palestinian Authority has a limited self-rule, so it can issue. It runs the schools, it runs the sewage, it runs the municipalities, it runs the health system, and it has the right to issue permits for construction or for economical development. But this is done in limited areas in the expanse of the West Bank, which was occupied in 1967. These designated areas occupy around 39% of the West Bank, and there is no contiguity. There are pieces scattered in this space. We can show, this is the West Bank, and now you'll show the other. And these designated areas for Palestinians are, the other one, are actually locked in between a massive area controlled by Israel, where settlers can expand, and where Israelis who drive in the highways have no idea that they are not in Israel. The road signs are all like in Israel. They very rarely indicate names of Palestinian villages. Only some of the Palestinian bigger towns are written. But every small Israeli settlement or colony, even with 40 people, has a road sign of its own, including settlements that are, even according to Israeli regulations, were built illegally. For me, all the settlements are illegal. All of them are illegal according to international law. But even according to the very lenient Israeli laws and regulations, there are around 150 outposts that were built without authorization. And even those have their road signs. Just when I leave Ramallah, there is a big junction, very dangerous junction, that the Israeli Ministry of Public Affairs, together with the army, upgraded it to be a safer place. It is called after a nearby outpost, a totally illegal outpost that was built on private land of Palestinians and through the falsification of papers. They falsified papers. I learned it from the Israeli court. We know that everybody knows that these are falsified papers. They could not remove, even though they could not remove the settlement, this outpost. And now the Israeli authorities, official authorities, name it name it according to this outpost, Givat Asaf. I asked the spokesperson of the Israeli Public Work Ministry, or whatever you call it. So why do you name a central junction according to an illegal outpost, Givat Asaf? And they say, oh no, we call it according to how people know it. I say, but there are thousands of Palestinians who know Dir Dibuan village, it's on or Betin village, on which land it is built. So the Palestinians, the hundreds of thousands of Palestinians know it by the name, know the area by the name of the villages. But the name is according to what a few thousand Jews, how few thousand Jews know it. So I live in this reality where I see my own government and my own representatives, official representatives, do everything possible to make Palestinians disappear from the attention and the eyes of an average Israeli. This is the process. And you see here the very complex map that will need me also some good hours to explain this maze, this confusing maze. That is not unsimilar to a reality that has developed on the other side of the green line, which means in Israel proper, where land has been taken from Palestinians, from the remaining Palestinians after 1948. Land has been taken so that those who remained in the country, who were not expelled, were in the built areas of their villages. And now with time and with the growth of population, they don't have more access to more land. So they live in ever more congested conditions. So villages that had space and room for people and for animals and for agriculture became actual slums, became townships inside Israel proper, where Palestinians have the right to vote, unlike people in the West Bank and Gaza, even though the Israeli government continues to govern and to decide about it to all the Palestinians. So I would have taken you to Hebron. I would have taken you also to al-Fahim, which is a city inside Israel, a Palestinian city, to see the differences, to see the similarities. On the one hand, expulsion, on the other hand, congestion of Palestinians. I know that the world has followed or still talks about the peace process and the failure of the peace process. And what I'm describing to you is actually the outcome of the negotiation process that is known in the world as the Oslo process. And I refuse to call it peace process. It was a negotiation process. And I say, after all these years of following it from close, that this was this reality of Palestinian enclaves completely or locked in an Israeli expanse, that this was the aim. This was the initial aim of Israel when it embarked on negotiations with the Palestinians. The aim was to foil, in short, the aim was to foil by all means the establishment of a Palestinian state as seen by the world as natural and welcome and part of the negotiation, as a result of the negotiation process, a state which would have been in Gaza and the West Bank. Look at UN resolutions, look at people's international leaders' statements, and look at what Palestinian leaders have said. They agreed to the establishment of a state as a compromise, a very bitter compromise, because it would have been only on 23% of historic Palestine. But they agreed in order to stop the bloodshed and the danger of permanent brutalization. So this was a very generous offer by the Palestinians, which are part of the majority in the Middle East. We are the minority. The Jews are the minority. The Palestinians are part of an Arab majority in the Middle East. So this was an offer for them after years of bloodshed to us. And at that time, in the 90s, the Israeli peace camp did accept also the idea of a Palestinian state in the West Bank and Gaza, East Jerusalem being the capital of the Palestinian state. But Israeli authorities, when we look at facts on the ground and policies implemented on the ground by Israeli governments, and it doesn't matter right-wing or center, Labor or Likud, was the same, to foil this possibility. And the one way was to disconnect Gaza and Gaza population from the West Bank. While in Oslo, there was a clear declaration of both sides that Gaza and the West Bank are seen as one territorial unit. And Israel did just the opposite, disconnect them. They are disconnected geographically, but they shouldn't have been, there should have been ways for Gaza population to go to the West Bank and vice versa, and to exercise their family, social, economical, cultural relations in a normal way. Instead of Israel made Gaza into a closed enclave. And this was already since 91. Since 91 is that the Palestinians from Gaza cannot move freely and need an Israeli permit for everything, which they have to do outside of Gaza, which means only the few get a permit. Very similar to the pass system in South Africa. And since 93, Israel, and with, again, under the guise of the peace process, Israel emulated the reality of Gaza as an enclave in the West Bank, creating enclaves in the West Bank. Any moment, two soldiers can disconnect one enclave in the West Bank from another. When I go out of Ramallah to the west of Ramallah, there are roads, there are exits of villages that have a yellow gate. At any yellow gate, soldiers can come and close the gate and disconnect the village from other village on the road. If further down there is another gate, you close this, you disconnect Gaza, you disconnect Ramallah from the western side. The southern side of Ramallah area is blocked from its villages and southern parts by a wall and also by some gates. The same thing with the eastern part. At any moment, a whole area with hundreds of thousands of people can be, or some villages with hundreds of people can be disconnected from the world. As a political measure, a military measure, as a political pressure on Palestinians. And this is the reality, and it doesn't seem to be changed. And we see that Trump administration is actually accepting it, has accepted this reality of Palestinian enclaves. You can call it reservations, you can call it Bantustans. By this reality of enclaves that was created by bureaucratic means, military orders that confiscate land, that designate land to Israeli settlements, that declare special lands as as state land while it is private Palestinian property or property of the village or of a town, by declaring land security area so you cannot enter, by many different bureaucratic militaristic tricks. What it tells me that this is the true Israeli compromise. We are talking about compromises and painful compromises. And this was the virtual Israeli compromise. This is the Israeli compromise between a need or a wish to see Palestinians disappear the way they disappeared, for example, from Hebron. So just not to see them and let them go out of the country or expel them out of the country, and the realization that we cannot repeat it. We cannot repeat now 1948. We cannot expel the Palestinians the way we expelled them in 1948. For geopolitical reasons, Jordan is not going to accept them. The same with Lebanon, the same with the world. It's not acceptable the way it was in 1948 and in war times. So the Israeli compromise or the Israeli solution is to condense them in the enclaves. And if I go back to words, it's very, I say and I wonder how much you can, when you go to the West Bank, things look normal. You go to Ramallah, I call it the 5-star prison. You go to Ramallah, there are beautiful, there are shops and houses and nice houses and nice cars. But the feeling of suffocation also always exists. And of course, the land grab, or the deprivation of people from their land affects very seriously the economy, the Palestinian economy. You cannot develop anything. And more young people are without work and looking for work and going outside and wishing to go outside to leave the country because they have no horizon in the West Bank. And as they don't have no horizon in the Gaza Strip. I think I'll know better what to say once you ask me questions.
Why don't we open it up for questions, and Amira can take it in any direction you want at this point. Amira.
How do you think that historically the United States foreign policy has helped the conflict?
Amira likes taking a number of questions. Does somebody else have a question? You should.
I'm curious about the context of conflict and how you manage the perception of your coverage. Because I think that from an outside perspective, it's black or white. It's either the Palestinian side or the Israeli side. And I'm just curious sort of how you say your words fail you, but those are what you have. So how do you engage with your words on addressing the perceptual bias of your readers who will never go to heaven, who will never visit these places? And the reason why I ask that is because I think when we cover violence or conflict here in the city of Chicago, people are not going anywhere. People are not going to communities that face this violence. Yeah. And so even traveling 4 miles west or 6 miles south doesn't happen. And so I think that's something that we struggle with too, is how to create a reality that breaks past implicit perception that people have about communities, about history.
David.
I don't know if I'll ever be able to go alone, but if I were to be able to go, or in the general area, I'd like to know about the points of intersection between Palestinians and Israelis. Are there any? Organized or informal, or some sort of points of intersection between the two, bicultural medium? Where is that happening, if any place at all?
Okay. United States, until the present administration, was nominally against the settlements, for example, seeing them as, but then use different terms how to relate to them, but never exercised it, but never used its political leverage in order really to stop them. Maybe at a certain moment, it was there were some few moments when it managed to freeze them it was in the Bush, the father. At his times, there was a call for freeze, and when the Israeli prime minister refused, United States blocked the loan for security purposes, and that's when the Labour Party came to power. So it was said that it was some sort of a message that America gave to Israelis and to Israeli business class that understood that they're about to lose American support if they continue with the colonization process. But since then, there was an American dismay at certain colonization project east of Jerusalem in an area called El Khan El Ahmar, Ma'ale Adumim, and it managed to block the Israeli colonization project over there for several years. Though Israel had its tricks, but it is an area that did not expand the way Israel wanted it to expand, though it does expand. So it does show that when the U.S. does not agree to something, the Israeli governments have to withdraw. But it was never used really in a comprehensive way, so that to block the settlements, the expansion of settlements all over the West Bank. Sometimes the American administration used settlements as saying that settlements are an obstacle to peace. Sometimes that they are considered illegal early on, but again, always on the level of declarations. Bush, the son, said something that we have to acknowledge changes on the ground. But during Obama administration, this was not the open speech of we have to accept this. But Obama preferred not to touch it. Now with Trump, we understand that it is all accepted and seen as Israel's right, and that's the message that Israel gets. And indeed, the colonization process is accelerating now, really accelerating, as much as it is not so much in people, because it's not people, even though people are encouraged to move to the settlements, you can say that not more than 10% of the Israeli Jewish population of Israel has moved to the settlements, which tells that people are not that, I mean, even though they get much better conditions and living conditions and better education and beautiful view and fresh air and huge houses, which they wouldn't have in Israel proper, still this is not enough to attract more people. But the colonization is by allocating more and more land to the settlers. So land which is given for agricultural reasons, and now there is a new fashion of some very few families who own a lot of, who own herds of sheep or cows, and this needs money. It's not one weirdo who goes to have a goat on the hills. It's really a lot of property, a lot of money, which is clear that they get assistance from Israeli official authorities to have it, and then they expand with their sheep, and on their way to the pastures, which used to be pastures for Palestinian shepherds, they terrorize everybody around them. Simply terrorization, and the Israeli army comes to their assistance because the Israeli army has to protect Israeli citizens. So they terrorize Palestinian shepherds, and the outcome, just as it was in Hebron, the outcome is that Palestinians are restricted from reaching their own land. So the the orders to restrict movement are on the people who live in the place for years, who own the land, and allowing Israeli Jews to go with their to go and plant and reach the water resources and go to the green pastures after the winter, etc. This is so you get much more. You get control over much wider area. Of course, the decisions of Trump to move the embassy was taken by Israel. To move the embassy to Jerusalem was taken by Israel as an encouragement. So is Trump's declaration that he acknowledges the annexation of the Golan Heights to Israel, even though that according to international law it is not relevant or it is not valid. But this has encouraged Israel a great deal. How do you reach the readers? How do you engage the readers? Yeah, this is always my question, and I feel sometimes that, if people ask me what's most difficult task in your work, I say the most difficult thing is that I write to people who don't want to know. Israel is still a democracy for Jews. We can exercise our right to express, the right of the freedom of expression, and the right for information. We managed to get a lot of information from Israeli authorities about this process of colonization. Nothing is secret, and we managed to get it based on the law of freedom of information. In details, how many outposts and how many decrees to demolish houses either of Palestinians or of Israeli settlers, the number of the size of area that was confiscated by this and that order and according to which year, etc. So there is no problem to exercise our right for freedom of information. The problem is that there is no duty to know, of the public, no duty to know what we give them. And then if they do happen to read just the headline, they don't care. I say that, when I write a piece of news, I say I address the people's intelligence, and it's some kind of still a tribute of confidence in people's intelligence and morality when I write piece of news. But then when I write the opinion piece, it is when I've given up on this. And then I say what I think. And that's it, just at least to take it out of my system. And yet, Israelis do know. I mean, there are many soldiers there. There are many soldiers in the West Bank, and they know. When they are 20, they accept it as normal. Some of them, when they get a bit older, when they become fathers to children or mothers, some of them, really not enough, start to think that maybe something was wrong, that something was crazy about standing at a gate, at the barrier, at the separation barrier, and not allowing farmers to reach his land, or waiting for, or taking looking at a permit that the farmer has to reach his own land. But these are too few, because people, at the end, Israeli Jews benefit from this reality. So when they benefit, they don't want to know. And they will find many rationalizations why they shouldn't know, or rationalizations for the situation. So my solution is sometimes to address outside audiences and readers, waiting for the pressure that might come from the outside, from Europe, from grassroots. and I'm not the only one. There is a group, the group of Israelis, group of Israeli organizations that collect information and publish them in several languages, and appeal to the world. And I say it is so important to appeal to the world because it is a place, beside what the harm that we are doing to Palestinians, the wrong that we are doing to Palestinians, it is a place where a third world war, that this kind of tensions can lead, and kind of atrocities can lead to a third world war, more than any other place in the world. Imagine there are Jewish groups, Messianic Jewish groups, who advocate the construction of the third temple on Al-Aqsa instead of Al-Aqsa Mosque. Imagine. They are totally, we can say they are lunatic, but they have power in this government and growing power in the Israeli society. Imagine that they succeed in destroying one wall in a mosque. What this can have, what this can make cause. Points of intersection. Look, there are many. With all the need to separate, we are in a small area, we all the time intersect. The conditions are very different. The laws are separate. There is military law for Palestinians and civil law for Israelis. So the infrastructure is different. Good and excellent for Israeli Jews and Israelis, and bad for Palestinians. So, but Palestinians are confronted by soldiers all the time. There are certain activities, civilian activities, that need contact with Israeli authorities because the Israeli authorities still control the land of Palestinians. You need a permit from an Israeli officer to go and work outside of the West Bank, in Israel proper. You need, in order to exist according to the registration, to the population registry, it's the Israeli authorities that have to confirm the details. So the Palestinians do not have, the Palestinian Authority, and also Hamas, they do not control the population registry. It's the Israeli Ministry of Interior that actually is in control of the registry. So for them to decide who is a he or a she, it needs an Israeli confirmation. And for somebody that was born, if he's not registered by an Israeli official in the Israeli computer, this person does not exist. So even during the wars, during the wars on Gaza, 3 big wars, many other, still there was, at first it was a Palestinian official going with a suitcase with many documents of the newborn, going to the Israeli office, handing them there the papers, and they register the newborns during the wars. Now it's done electronically, but you have to be registered by an Israeli officer. Then you do have Israeli shops, big malls in the West Bank where Palestinians go and buy, because it turns out to be cheaper. And then you have, even though it's against the law for Israelis, you have Palestinian garages that fix cars, and Israelis go there because it's cheaper. So you have places which are more benign, of more benign intersection, and places which are violent. In short, you cannot ignore, but it is not, how would I say, it is not an equal relationship. It is not relations of equals. In Israel proper, the Palestinians are citizens, so they are part of, even though they are second or third or fourth rate citizens, they are meeting Israelis. They are working with Israelis. There are hospitals where you have doctors and patients who are both Palestinians and Jews. So this is in Israel proper, where it should be better, but it is normal because they are all citizens. We are all citizens. So there is intersection. And there are groups of Israelis that indeed that oppose the occupation and work together with Palestinians, for example, in different forms to protect them, and they offer themselves as human shields to protect them from settlers' attacks. They are not enough, they are not many, but they also exist.
Can I ask one more? Rebecca mentioned in her introduction that both Hamas and the Palestinian
Authority.
Sorry, had thrown you out and were angered. What did you do, or what did they do, and what was that about?
When I lived in Gaza in '95, I wrote about the Arafat established what was called the Nation State Security Court, which had an Al Gore endorsed these courts, by the way, and which will enable the PA to have a very quick and without any due process to put people in trial and also to execute them for charges of different charges, usually terror or what they called or treason or whatever. Very ambiguous. The law was very ambiguous, very unclear, and I wrote that it is not. It was established during some hike in the number of suicide attacks against Israelis. And I said that I wrote something that he and his entourage didn't like, and they ordered me out. But I must say that Fatah people all, and not only them, but they joined together to actually, they went to Arafat and told him that I should not leave. And indeed it worked after 3 days, and they found a way to. And then the second time when I was already in Gaza, in the West Bank, and the same thing, I wrote something against the executions that Arafat's regime in Gaza had of people. And I wrote against the death penalty. And again, it was the same thing, but it was easy this time because I knew the procedure and I knew how to go to somebody of the Fatah party, and immediately he went to the police to shout at them and to say, don't touch her, and it was easy. With Hamas, I went to Gaza by boat in 2008. Israeli journalists are not allowed to enter Gaza since end of 2006. Until then, I entered normally. But since 2006, and because of some, they say security reasons, because there were journalists who were kidnapped by certain people, not necessarily by Hamas. So I managed to enter. There were 5 boats who managed to enter Gaza in 2008. It was called the Free Gaza boat. That managed to enter Gaza 5 or 4 times. And I joined the 3rd boat that entered, the 3rd sail, and meant to remain at least 3 months in Gaza. We came from Cyprus by boat, and the Israelis allowed for, now it seems impossible, but then it was, for some reason, the Israelis allowed us to get to Gaza. I meant to be 3 months. Hamas placed on me, when the delegation that came by boat was a British delegation, left back, I remained, but Hamas placed on me surveillance for 24 hours every day. It was very annoying, but okay, I treated it like, anthropological experiment. And it was not easy to write like this. But then after 3 weeks, they got tired and they ordered me out. And I do have some friends in Hamas who tried very hard to revoke this order, very, very hard, but it didn't work. And that's where I saw that there is flexibility in Fatah, the flexibility that does not exist with Hamas. And they kicked me, so I had to leave. They at least allowed me to stay one more night, and to say goodbye to my friends. And I thought that I would not see them in 20 years. But then the war broke out, which means I could have been there. If they didn't kick me out, I could have been there during the war, the first big war, 2008, 2009. But then when the army left Gaza, withdrew or whatever, the next day I came through Rafah, through Egypt. So it was, I came through Egypt, and this time they knew I was there. They didn't touch me. They didn't put surveillance on me, and I stayed for 5 months. So, and I wrote, and they just didn't meet with me, but I wrote, first of all, I had to write about, to collect testimonies about the war. So this was my main goal. But they don't, both parties also don't like criticism, and so my relations. It's not that my relations with the PA is not good. It's not that they call me every morning to give me a scoop. It's not, and neither Hamas, but.